Welcome. I'm Jane Peterson with the Human Systems Institute, and this is the webinar, Is Work Broken? This is a re-recording of the live webinar so that I don't have to get permission of everyone that appeared on it. We had a lively discussion, and if you missed it, this is a way for you to kind of get the content that was in the original recording, and I'm grateful that you're joining me. So let us take up the topic of is work broken? I think what I did in the webinar is put in a TikTok that I will actually put in as a link for you in the email. And you can go and look at that TikTok. And I'm very grateful for that. It's at I Contain Platitudes. I'm very, very grateful for her honest sharing of her experience of how work was broken for her and the thoughts that she shared on that. So I invite you to go take a minute and perhaps go look for this TikTok. The link will be in the email. Take a look at it and see what you think. And then the next thing I want to share after you've looked at that is a quote from a CEO. I call this the view from the top. And this was an email he sent to his entire organization. It was lauded as a brilliant missive addressing this problem of productivity. So I'm curious what you think, if anything is missing for you in this focus, and what you think of how he positions employees as facing lower productivity. So I'm going to invite you to pause the replay and read this through and see what you think. So hopefully when you read that article right there, you noticed that one of the things that was missing in his questions about productivity were the actual feelings and experiences of the people that are needing to, quote, be productive. So what follows here is my meditation on the social worlds that we've built, including the world of commerce and work and companies and nonprofits, all of the organizations we build. And I put this into three parts. Now, the first part is this idea that we're bodies, not just minds. The second part is looking at the experiences that human beings have of grief and fear, which were really prominent in the pandemic, versus the ideas we have and the systems we have of productivity and capitalism. The final part looks at what can you do given the systems that we're living in? What can you do? So the first point I'd like to make, part one here, is we are bodies, not just minds. And when I was working on my dissertation, I came up with this view, with this kind of metaphor for what I was reading in the literature of the corporate view of human beings is this idea that we're minds on a stick for a lot of the work we do. We're not actually seen as a human being. Or if we're doing work like serving fast food, we're muscles without a mind. But here the body is being used as a part of a machine, basically. But there's not a real sense of us as a living being. And what I've come to understand in the work that I do is that we are this web of experiences and relations and meaning making and connection, that the real complexity of being human is being an embodied being within a social body of relations. And that we are worlds of connections and relationships. We have lives outside of work. We often end up working to live in our modern world and feeling this false urgency to meet another sales quota or put together another slide deck. When we compare that though to feeding our family and spending time with an elderly relative who might not be well, that we might not have much longer, that urgency to build another slide deck can feel really false to us. And this tendency that we have in our particularly corporate world to put the fault on the employee, to put the fault on the individual, I think is really highly misplaced. First of all, we don't live life so much as individuals, or we are more and more. as our systems kind of tear apart the fabric of our social worlds. We are really social bodies. We are a living, intelligent body being. And the word I like to use instead of body, which sounds kind of, like a separate thing from us. Well, we have the body or a body. I like the word soma. Soma to me is a Greek word that means the living, intelligent body being. It's something that really addresses the wisdom that is possible for us to access in our lived and felt experience of being a human in a body. However, from a corporate perspective, soma is messy and needy. It eats, it sleeps, it can't be working 24/7. It's moral, we die, and we have strong emotions. We have feelings about things. So it doesn't really line up with the corporate need for productivity. Ironically, the happiest people, I saw a recent study that was done, are in the jobs of like forestry and agriculture. These are jobs that use the body in relation to the natural world. And that satisfies a lot of the needs for connection and for meaningful work and for physical work that has just been kind of squeezed out of a lot of our work right now. Soma, to be, quote, productive, needs rest. It needs connection, play. These are things that don't really factor into our modern work life. And we work so much harder, even more than primitive hunter-gatherer societies work in the day. Medieval serfs, it turns out, had fewer days off than we do now. And that led me to question, like, who benefits from all this extra work? Because we're working our soma selves so hard in pursuit of what? And that led me to a second question, which is part 2 here, the grief and fear versus productivity and capitalism. I ask myself, if I think about what it means to be a living body being in relation to other people in an environment, what are my goals? Well, of course, I need a healthy environment. I need a place and, experiences that support my physical well-being. But I also need that sense of connection and belonging and being part of something else, especially something where I can make a meaningful contribution, where I can have a sense of purpose. And these kinds of things are all based in tangible living systems. So this is a life-focused model, if you will, or a life-focused set of goals. The way we've set up corporate capitalism right now, it's a positive feedback loop, which means it's a success to the successful system that is built into the structure of the way it's running, which is the goal is basically to accumulate more capital for the owners to invest so that they can make even more capital. So it's a win-lose kind of game. It maximizes, of course, if you're trying to accumulate capital, you want to maximize profit, minimize expense, which would be labor's expense. So the focus on productivity makes sense. You want to simplify operations, again, so that you get the most for the least amount of investment, so you can accumulate more money. Now, this particular system is based in human-made ideas. These don't necessarily exist in nature. And it's based on abstractions like money. There's no such real thing as money. We made that up. So does anybody see a problem with this? Do these two sets of goals overlap? Remember, the complaint by business and management is that there's a loss in productivity. Well, clearly, one of the things that gets lost here is our somatic experience. And loss is a key word here. Not only have companies, quote, lost productivity, but in this recent pandemic, we have experienced a lot of loss. Losses as devastating as losing a family member or a dear friend. Loss of my childcare source. Loss of having kids go away to school and getting some peace. Loss of a spouse, because they turned to drugs to deal with stress. Even loss of our favorite neighborhood coffee shop. It's like we've lost the kind of anchors in many ways that have given our life a sense of stability and continuity. And, loss is a difficult thing for us. If you have loss and instability over time, most people are going to feel distressed by that. In particular, we've all these, from ambiguous or small losses to really heartrending losses. We've been going through a lot of grief, and our society just simply doesn't grieve. We don't know how to do that very well. And in my studies, I realized that there's a physical process to grieving. The first stage of the somatic process of grief is disorganization. We go through shock, denial, a loss of our normal kind of functioning programs. We don't function well. And I was studying assistive technology when I was coming up with this model. And I realized, these would be kids who had come back from Afghanistan and they may have lost a leg or an arm. I realized that they're just getting up and walking to the bathroom would suddenly be something that their motor programs couldn't execute anymore. They couldn't do it. So it's that really necessary disorganization when there's been a big change that is required for us to actually let go of our old programs so that we can enter the second stage, which is the process of reorganization. If our disorganization is contained, that is, there's support, like, for example, the kid comes back from Afghanistan and in that time, and there's a hospital, there's doctors, there's social workers, the family members will come. There's really something to hold the disorganization. That holding is what allows the person to kind of fall apart and have the opportunity to begin to put pieces together in a different form. So reorganize around the loss and develop new patterns. Without that kind of containment, we're likely to get stuck. We won't be able to actually process through the disorganization into the reorganization phase. And illness can result. We can be dysfunctional because of it. We'll be less productive because we haven't actually had the resources and support we needed to get into and through the reorganization phase. And honestly, it typically takes a year for people to go through all of the rituals and times of year and things that are necessary for us to be able to reorganize. Just as a point of contrast, a colleague of my husband, who I also knew when I was working at the same company, she tragically lost her daughter to a car accident, a 21-year-old daughter in the prime of her, the beginning of her adulthood, lost her in a traffic accident. And the company gave her 3 days off. Now, how much of a human being do you think is going to be able to return to work? I mean, that's just a devastating loss. And indeed, there wasn't a lot of, she had some social support, but there wasn't really the time that she needed to heal. And when I met her a number of years later, she'd become ill. And it really broke my heart because, if we did things differently, I think it might have been really helpful for her. So this idea of time and containment, so we have a process of reorganization. Those are necessary for us to process all the grief and loss that we've been through. And then what happens is the final phase that you'll see is emergence. This is like a newly organized person, and even a group. You can have a team go through this or a family go through this. They can emerge in a way that allows them to carry on, and they're not going to somaticize the unprocessed grief and loss. The key here is containment and time. And it's interesting to me that many employees have expressed that what they would prefer, even over more money, is more time with loved ones, time, to play, time just to be a human being. And like I said earlier, we have fewer days off than medieval serfs did. So this becomes a physical issue in a way, not just an emotional issue. And it's not something that's being well addressed by our current system. And then there's the issue of fear. Fear activates our sympathetic the sympathetic branch of our autonomic nervous system. It's a cortisol system. It's that fight, flight, or activated, freezing in terror, hoping that the tiger will walk by you. It's the opposite of our most productive state, which is a relaxed, socially engaged present state, which is parasympathetic. It's the other branch of our nervous system that's activated when we're in that relaxed, engaged state. So fear is the opposite, and fear is designed for temporary emergencies, for us to be mobilized. It's an activating state for us to take action in the world. Well, maybe you feel a flush of anger and resentment and fear when your boss lays another deadline on because somebody else has left the company, but you can't act on that. You can't just throw those papers back in your boss's face, right? The environments that we've built don't allow, they're hierarchical, they're dominance-based. They don't allow a lot of people to actually express or act on what they feel. So eventually this becomes somaticized. It begins to live in our bodies and reduces our effectiveness. So not only did we have the fear of the pandemic, am I going to die of COVID? Am I going to die from the vaccine? Whatever is my beloved going to die? It's all of those kinds of things that we've been living through. Or am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my house because I've lost my job? All of that has been very difficult for us to live with for so long. So this becomes, like a physical problem in a certain way. And the body, as I said, mind's on a stick, isn't something that is being taken into account when we look at productivity and the system that prioritizes money over people. So I don't know that that we're unproductive. I don't think so. I'm sure we're not lazy. Most people really want to make a contribution, but we are exhausted and our nervous systems are fried. And what's astonishing to me is that management doesn't seem to recognize this. And I puzzled over that for a long time until I found some studies that showed that the more power a person had, the more resource rich their environment, the more their brains and bodies would produce more testosterone, more dopamine, chemicals that allowed them to take advantage of that, and less of oxytocin and things that allow you to be bonding and be empathetic. So the more power you have, the less empathy you have. So the higher up you are, like our CEO at the beginning of this program, the less you're going to really, from your body, brain on down, feel empathy and connection to other people. So the way our systems work, if you're in the middle or in the bottom, you're feeling it and you have less options, less autonomy. And there's a big study that was done a number of years ago called the Whitehall study that looked at civil servants at different stages, different rankings in the British system, that found that the lower you are, the poorer your health outcomes are, the less options you have. So we're not really designed as living beings. We were in small tribes, hunter-gatherer, close relations, a fair amount of autonomy. We're not really designed for the kind of environments that we've created, and that are hierarchical, that are dominance-based, that use fear of loss as a tool to keep people in line. So it's not surprising that productivity has gone down, right? You can see that these are not really compatible systems. And this also, I think a fair question is like, well, productivity, the word is produce. What is being produced and for whom? And this idea of productivity is somewhat positional. It's like there's relationships involved in this. Like, what are we producing? Who's doing the producing? Who's receiving the benefit of that? The current system we have right now doesn't include values for human or planetary health. And it can't. It's based around the abstraction of money. So the consequences of that are pretty obvious right now in terms of our planet, in terms of our own well-being, in terms of, whether we're thriving or not. So part 3 here, what do you do about this? Well, obviously, I would love, I mean, I'm hoping that people are going to be subversive where they can and begin to change systems where you have the uh, ability to do so. And if you're in one of these boxes, then it's really important for you to be able to recognize that a lot of times it isn't you, it's the system. You need to have self-compassion. It's in owners and managers, higher managers' interest for you to think you're the problem, because then you don't question the system and you don't push back on it. And from their perspective, the system may not be broken. But if we want healthy people, then the system is not working well. It's not that work is broken. It's that the systems that create the work we have and the environments that that's being performed in are not healthy. And so really being able to distinguish between, is it the system or is it me? And have compassion for yourself when you're in a system that isn't kind and puts you in a little box like that. That's the first step. Second is to, get clarity about what you can influence and what you can't. Like, where can you, if you play golf with the management and on Sundays, you might be able to be a little bit persuasive for some changes that would be helpful. But if you're not, then it's being clear about what you can do and what you can't. And get your own priorities clear. Like, what is really important to you? I mean, a lot of us face the potential loss or the loss of a loved one or our health. That puts working for someone else's goals into perspective. That's, I think, behind a lot of the great resignation, is people decided that, hey, I want to work for me. Finally, just breathe and be kind, because those around you are working with a fried nervous system too. We're all kind of suffering from this. If you are a management, in addition to the previous list, which you also need, find ways to include our humanity and yours, really see people. I read a book a while back by the author Rupert Ross, where he was talking about a group of social workers on a reservation, and they were dealing with enormous amounts of trauma on a day-to-day basis. And they would take the time, in spite of the pressing needs in their community, they would take the time every morning to sit down and check in with each person, and just to find out what was going on with that person, what they might need, and to be there for each other. And I think as managers, we're so afraid that, we have to do the right thing, or we'll be liable, or, we are just anxious about, what I wasn't trained for this, that kind of thing. So I think it's really important to realize that you can still accompany. You don't have to fix somebody. You can accompany them. And accompanying is being able to listen to, you're not a parent, to be able to listen to someone, to understand this is a human being more than just a worker. And people aren't broken. They do need containment. They do need accompaniment. They do need to feel like a person. And it doesn't, if you learn how to listen well, this is not going to hurt your productivity. It's actually going to help it. Because when we're listened to and we're heard, even if briefly, we start to feel connected. We start to feel that there's some care in the place that we're spending so much time and giving so much energy. So learn how to listen well and learn how to accompany people. Don't try to fix them. That actually takes away people's dignity. Create ways for people to connect and support each other. The water cooler that we used to have, that was a valuable place. Not the gossip wasn't always such a good thing, but it was a place where we found each other. And that can be a way where you can create those kinds of structures in an organization. Also recognize where your sphere of influence is and where it ends, especially for middle management, which you're getting pulled from the bottom and pulled from the top. Understand what is actually possible for yourself, and give yourself grace for doing what you can. Let's see. Finally, if you are an owner, you can change the system. Even if you're owning your small bakery, it's, finding other operating systems that give people more autonomy, making sure that people are training and helping each other instead of competing. There are systems besides dominance and hierarchy. that that can be very, very productive, because people are engaged when they're in those kinds of systems. If you're an activist, go to it. Do whatever you need to do to challenge some of the roots and the foundations of the system that are not going to be productive or helpful in human terms. If you're in a position where you create work for people, provide meaningful work. There's a book out by David Graeber called Bullshit Jobs. That's the name of the book. Don't put people in bullshit jobs. There is a layer of fluffing that goes on in the corporate world where if we have more people working for us, we're more important, those kinds of things. Like, resist the urge, like create things where people can make meaningful contributions. They'll be much more healthy for that. So depending on where you are in the Russian dolls, what you have actual control over, make sure that you give people the tools and means to do the job. As people have resigned, as systems have become under-resourced, finding ways to provide adequate resources for the task at hand, and being aware that people are often working without the tools that they need. Just being able to acknowledge that rather than continue to demand people give more. There are physical and human limits to what people can reasonably do for a sustained period of time. So being thoughtful about creating systems that support human beings, resisting the false urgency, really looking at what's meaningful and what's appropriate, stepping back from your ownership or stepping back from what you're trying to do, and really, reevaluating it. So the human factor is really a key part of what you're doing. I mean, there's all kinds of new models emerging, for purpose organizations. There's organizations in trust. There's that are for the public good. There's all kinds of other ways of doing things than the system that we have. Don't be sold on that one. If you're an activist, you've already figured that out. you continue on, learn how systems work. Systems thinking is your best friend, because you can figure out where leverage points are if you really understand them. And we do need a change, for sure we do. So this question, is work broken? It depends on where you stand. If you're benefiting from the system as it is, you might say no. For the health and well-being of humans and the planet, yes, the system is broken. As Krishnamurti likes to say, my favorite quote here is, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." So I hope that you're inspired to question the system that we have, to advocate for bringing human values back, to take care of yourself as a subversive and profoundly important act, if you're involved in this kind of work. If you'd like to learn more about organizations, what makes them healthy or not, how these larger systems work, where the levers are, I will, for the last time actually, be leading the Facilitating Organizational Constellations program. There are 3 modules, 10 sessions online. There's an in-person intensive of about a week at the farm, and then another 10 sessions online. So it's an 11-month program that would equip you with tools to analyze organizations, figure out where you can have an impact, bring tools that help bring the body back into the organization. So there's a link there if you want to click that to learn more. I'm also doing one that looks at families from the same kind of lens, Facilitating Systemic Family Constellations. Again, it's a 3-module program over 11 months. And a shorter program, it's just 6 sessions that has to do with working with the ways people express themselves through somatic signals. So those are the offerings from the Institute. These first 2 programs I've been teaching for 20 years now. I will only be teaching them this last year. So if you like what you see here and want to learn more, reach out to me. You can email me at humansystemsinstitute@gmail.com if you have questions, or click one of the links and you'll see more information there. And I want to thank you for joining me, and hope that you're inspired to recognize what's going on, be kinder with yourself, take action where you can. Thank you.